Recently, Minnesota commemorated the 20th anniversary of the first charter school legislation to be passed in the nation. And again, it happened right here in Minnesota. The author of the law that many consider groundbreaking, former Minnesota State Senator Ember Reichgott Young, joins me now to discuss this topic. Thank you for joining us on Capitol Report, Senator.
Thank you.
Let's talk first, a little more broadly, about charter schools. They were essentially created to allow a school to operate without the typical oversight and regulations that other schools were managed under, and also to allow students to achieve academic excellence in a different setting. So do you think that charter schools are achieving this goal of academic excellence today?
Yes, I do, and I think Minnesota can be proud. It came right out of the Minnesota Senate and eventually the Minnesota Legislature. Originally, Governor Rudy Perpich had a strong role in this in providing open enrollment and public school choice, which laid the foundation for chartering. And has it been successful? Yes. What chartering has done is open up the K-12 public education system to new options and ideas and more flexibility. And that not only has provided new opportunities for the 7% of the public school students in Minnesota that attend them, but it also has had a major impact on the public school system itself. And my hope is that we can continue to focus on the new ideas and new innovations and learning strategies from both chartering and district schools.
And we'll talk about your book in just a moment, but first you had said that you believe that charter schools have had a tremendous impact on Minnesota traditional schools. How so? What do you think was the greatest impact?
Well, the greatest impact was that it allowed, here's what chartering is. Chartering is allowing someone other than the public school system to deliver public education. So it opened up the system to allow parents and teachers to come in with new ideas. And these new ideas, some of them were longer school day, longer school year. That's where a lot of that got traction, and the public system responded. And I have seen many examples where the district schools have responded to some of the work of charter schools so that they could continue to be responsive to their parents.
Now, you wrote a book, Zero Chance of Passage, The Pioneering Charter School Story, and it focuses on the beginnings of charter schools. So can you take us back to 1988 and the initial charter school movement and up to 92 when the legislation ultimately passed?
I would love to. So first of all, I have always thought of Governor Rudy Perpich as being a visionary. He wanted the brain power state for Minnesota. So he broke all traditions and he proposed, with a firestorm of protest against him, the whole notion of public school choice. And so we in Minnesota passed open enrollment and post-secondary options in the mid-1980s before anybody else in the country. Well, Governor Perpich never had a part in charter schools, what I call chartering, but he opened the door to them. And then what happened is that the idea came from two other places. One is that Al Shanker, the president of the American Federation of Teachers, wrote a column in the New York Times talking about something called charter schools to give teachers more autonomy and to help to make the profession more of a profession. And then, in addition to that, here in Minnesota, there was a civic group called the Citizens League that still exists today, and it was a task force of civic leaders who consisted of business leaders, nonprofit educators who came up with a template for chartered schools. And that was what brought it to the legislature. Ted Koldery, still here in Minnesota, is a visionary and was one of the primary intellectual, if you will, authors of chartering.
And when you worked this through the legislature, did you really think that there was zero chance of passage, as the title indicates?
Well, I didn't, but where we got that title is that when we did this book, we interviewed 15 of the people involved in the process 20 years ago. Many were lawmakers, and some were union leaders, and some were national figures. But one of them was Representative Becky Kelso, who is a Democrat from Shakopee, who served in the Minnesota House for many years. And she was the leader and the champion of chartering in the House of Representatives. When I gave her the bill, I learned 20 years later in this interview, when asked, well, what did you think when Ember gave you the bill? She responded, I had zero confidence it would pass. So the title comes from the House author, which just shows you the dynamics and the difficulties of the journey to get it passed.
And moving into the present, you're currently the board vice chair of the Charter Schools Development Corporation. So what kind of changes have you seen in the creation and the administration of charter schools?
Well, I think that we're always evolving and learning. And what I'd like to see is more and stronger authorizers for chartering, as well as stronger board members. But I think the #1 problem today for chartered schools is access to facilities. They're not getting equal funding. They're not getting equal funding for the facilities, and therefore it is tougher for them to find them and to finance them. So that's one of the things that I think is important. Of course, we want to all focus on good quality schools and innovative schools, and I think that we're seeing a lot of that in our charter sector today.
So are you working with legislators currently to try to perhaps even the playing field on this access to facilities and some of the other concerns?
I would love to do that next year. I think there's a huge opportunity for that. We're holding back a lot of good charter schools because they don't have access and the same funding for facilities. And that's why I became vice chair of Charter Schools Development Corporation, because they're the leading nonprofit provider of financing and development of charter school facilities in the nation.
But ultimately, you still think charter schools are very strong?
I do, and I think Minnesota can be very, very proud. What I want to be sure to say is that that chartering came from the Minnesota legislature in a bipartisan fashion. It came from the middle of the political system. It came from a bipartisan combination of the Republican minority and Democratic majority, and it also came from outside the political spectrum, like the Citizens League. I don't believe chartering would have passed in the political climate of today, and that's because we don't have a middle anymore. So what I love about this story and all that it was in the journey to get it through, in the end, it passed with 42% of the Democratic majority voting for it and 56% of the Republican minority voting for it, with a friendly Democratic Speaker of the House. I hope that we see more big ideas like that pass in the future.
Okay, with those words, Ember Reichgott Young, thank you so much for this historical perspective on chartering and your ideas for the future. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.